Autism spectrum disorder, or simply autism, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by repetitive, restricted, and inflexible patterns of behavior, interests, and activities, as well as difficulties in social interaction and social communication. My name is Aiden. I've been making YouTube videos since I was 10 years old, and ever since last summer, I've made the switch from making Pokemon videos to making anime videos. For the past 2 years, it's been a yearly tradition for me to discuss my experiences living with autism. As with each year, I grow older and gain a more nuanced perspective of the world as the years go by. Last year's video was made in my first year of adulthood, and was also the longest of these videos at the time. In fact, its script is actually longer than this one. In essence, it truly was definitive, and frankly, the amount of new things I'll have to say will slowly begin to decrease as I grow further into my adult life. That said, many of you are fairly new to my videos and haven't seen last year's video, so I figured that before I start decreasing the scale of these yearly releases, that I'd go out in the biggest way I could. This video will be structured into 3 different volumes with many different chapters within them. Volume 1 will be an explanation of what autism is, Volume 2 will dive more into the contentious subjects featuring interviews of my autistic friends to help diversify our opinions, and Volume 3 will go over my personal life and the ways in which my autism diagnosis has helped form it. So without further ado, how about we begin? So what really is autism? I may have given the Wikipedia definition, but such a definition doesn't really tell you enough. Last year, I described autism as a lack of ability to understand non-autistic people, a definition that I think reigns true with my own personal experiences, but is also one that has since become scientifically backed with time. This year, I have an additional takeaway, which is how important the S in ASD is, as the spectrum dictates so much about how one is affected by autism. If you've seen the I have a surgeon, you'll know that some autistic people are scientifically proven to be isekai protagonists who are as smart as they are devilishly handsome, with their dreadful social skills merely being cute and quirky, while others are like Subaru and literally die every episode. While most of us are in a Rudius area, what is with me comparing the autism spectrum to isekai power levels? Well, I guess that truly is the most autistic way to explain it. Anyway, most people are somewhere in between, where their dedication to something can take them to great heights at the cost of their social skills. Granted, that is all very societally based. The only autistic people that will become successful are people who gather special interests in places that actually make them money, while most of us just had to settle for figure collecting addictions. Of course, I'd also be remiss to mention the people who are genuinely in more need of support, the people who are unable to live independently with their disorder. And these people absolutely should not be ignored. Well, I'll wait until later to really get into that. The most well-known thing that autism affects is one's social skills, but it's not really as simple as mere social anxiety, since anyone can have that. Despite having autism, I am a chatterbox. When you get me to go on about my favorite things, it is hard to get me to shut up. And frankly, most neurotypicals can struggle to match that same energy. Meanwhile, since I think very logically and to the point, I can struggle to make a lot of small talk with someone, since most things don't tend to interest me a whole lot, and I only ever feel like speaking when I feel comfortable to do so, since I know how weird the looks that people can get when I start rambling are. That's actually what causes my social anxiety. The fact that I can't read the room to save my life often makes it better for me to spend months in silence as I stake out the area around me before I decide to start talking more comfortably. Although, when I do feel safe around someone, I can generally have fun talking to them about anything, since I'm just happy to have my social needs filled. That feeling of safety is extremely important though. Most people tend to communicate their subtleties non-verbally, so it isn't until I achieve mutual comfort with someone that I can just be honest about the areas where they'll have to be patient with me in. Of course, there always happens to be some situations where people are so chill and accepting that I can put my walls down with them in a single conversation. This happened rather recently actually, as I had a multi-hour long conversation with this really chill black dude in an airplane, and I was amazed at how well I was managing the whole time, largely off the back of how easy he made it for me to feel comfortable in that conversation. All of what I'm saying about the bridge between autism and neurotypical neurotypicals is something that has recently begun to be researched into as well, with it being discovered that neurotypicals can have many of these same social difficulties, specifically when interacting with autistic people, suggesting that the divide between them is mutual. This has led to some autism activists to reconsider if autism truly is a disability, as in a world where autistic people are the majority, they'd be the ones running our society due to our disorder only makes us different instead of impaired. Now, I still believe it is a disability, and that's for two reasons. The first is that we absolutely shouldn't ignore the people with higher support needs under any circumstance. The other one, though, is just that we don't live in a world where we're in the majority. We're a minority, and given how important socializing is in our society, having so many difficulties understanding neurotypicals is a legitimate disability, even if all we can do is continue to live our lives despite that. Everything else I want to dwell on has to do with restricted and repetitive behaviors. I think one of the more obvious examples is with stimming, which is kind of like a fidget we do to stimulate ourselves. From what I've heard, most autistic people do this when they're feeling anxiety, but I've personally only done it when I'm feeling excitement. I've subconsciously made it more subtle as an attempt to mask my autism, but if you ever catch me playing a video game, you'll notice it in a heartbeat. A funny little tidbit about this is that sometimes I can be stimming so much while doing an exciting task that I'll need to catch my breath due to a lack of breathing. It sounds bad, but I actually don't mind it since it reminds me of just how much I love doing my favorite things. Although, I've also had a tendency to sort of fear the unknown as a result. Autistic people are well known to be picky eaters, and that stereotype reigned true for me as the person who could only live on chicken nuggets. Over the past few years though, I've grown to try a whole bunch of new things, and now I'm basically Naruto, the way I'll eat basically anything. I don't really know how this happened, but I will say that family gatherings will be a lot easier now. Speaking of food, I have a very ritualistic way in which I eat, and funnily enough, when I eat certain foods in a specific order, it does tend to make me stim as well. Such habits are very important to me, as having such a peaceful stability be disrupted can leave me in turmoil, however subtle it may look. As a result, most autistic people tend to be very resistant to changes which impede these habits. Even so, I don't know if I'd go as far as to call us stubborn, although I'll touch on my reasons for why later on. One thing I think is very important to understand, however, is how autistic people handle senses. Autistic people tend to be very sensitive to sensory input. For most, including myself, it's most prominent with sound, but it can even take other forms, like having too many things to look at or finding physical contact uncomfortable, both of which do apply to me. It's because of this that the concept of autistic burnout exists. While most are able to fight it off to an extent, sensory overload and overstimulation can cause a decrease in cognitive and physical ability. It's for this reason that Subaru is one of my all-time favorite characters, because even though I doubt he has autism, the social withdrawal of being a hikikomori is inherently relatable despite me never having been one. Also, ReZero is peak. The last sort of symptom I want to touch on is the special interest. I'm sure you've heard of the stereotypes of autistic people who are obsessed with trains, while for most autistic people it can be a bit more broad. Like non-autistic people, I have more dormant hobbies of things that I follow more casually. I think wrestling is a good example of that, as I loved it a lot more as a kid, but will still follow it as an adult. For the most part though, my special interests strictly follow video games and, more importantly, anime. My obsession for anime especially is very abnormal. I've seen over 100 days of anime, and I'm not even 20 years old yet. It's a medium that appeals to my autism for a few reasons, and I'd actually argue that Japanese culture itself is a big part of it. I took a vacation to Japan this year, and despite Tokyo being the biggest city in the world, it was so orderly and so well organized that I'd call it an extremely autism-friendly environment. Everything in Japan just makes sense, and a lot of those cultural aspects obviously follow through into their media. Since Japan has a culture of social order and fitting into the crowd, it tends to have a higher number of protagonists that feel like fishes out of water. Anime is also filled with tropes that can give you a general idea of a character as soon as you see them. Like, if a girl has twin tails, she's likely to be a tsundere, for example. This predictability doesn't mean that unique things can't be done with these characters, Akechi from Persona 5 being one of my favorite examples of a character taking a complete 180. Akechi is actually a phenomenal example of the kind of character that I'm able to relate to so much because of my autism. While Akechi is very obviously not autistic himself, the general theme of him hiding his true self, with that taking him to the brink of insanity, is an idea that touched me so much that he's now one of my favorite characters of all time. Persona 4 and 5 tackle ideas like this a lot too, and it contributes a ton to why it's my favorite franchise of all time. But it's not the only example of an anime that I enjoy because of my autism. Even though I hate diagnosing characters without a creator's confirmation, I strongly headcanon that Legoshi from Beastars has autism. He really is just that relatable to the point where even someone as stubborn as me can have that headcanon. It's his journey of maturity and self-acceptance about the very natural things he feels so much guilt over that makes Beastars an absolute masterpiece in my mind. It's a show that I feel like many can easily write off because of how very clearly weird it is, but its main character is so ridiculously well written that it has to be among my favorites. Other than that, there aren't really any anime that I feel like I like strictly because of my autism. Obviously, some shows about social anxiety like Bocchi the Rock and Welcome to the NHK will be favorites of mine, but as I established earlier, those themes are universal despite also applying to me. As for video games, I feel like I'm closer to your average neurotypical with them. I may love video games, but like most people, I'd consider myself more of a video game tourist. The only difference is that I tour between the same few video games instead of entirely new games. Most of my favorite games are niche strategy games, like competitive Pokemon SU, PvZ Heroes, and BTD6. I'm also a big Nintendo fan, having put a ton of hours into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. If you couldn't tell, I tend to play more competitive games with communities I can interact with, since I find that community aspect to sometimes be even more fun than the game itself. And it's why I've unfortunately kinda grown out of single player gaming, even if I'll still occasionally catch an absolute gem. And then just one last thing I want to do before we move on to our second volume is speak of a subject that I find particularly very interesting, as I'm under the belief that the timing of one's diagnosis does change how they view the world. I was diagnosed at the age of 2, and it's as a result of this that I was given a lot of extra attention and treatment in school. On one hand, this is a very good thing, since it allowed me to build skills to help me live independently with. On the other hand, it made it very obvious that I didn't belong, and being labeled as the autistic kid did make it harder to fit in, even if such a distinction became more blurred as I got older, where IEP programs were implemented more subtly. Granted, that doesn't mean I'm not grateful for the support I received. I'm sure most of you watching have heard of Chris Chan, an individual who was not given proper accommodation for their autism, despite their early diagnosis, which led to an incredibly deep rabbit hole that ended in one of the most horrifying ways imaginable. This is to say that you can't treat an autistic person like you would someone else. And while I obviously don't mean that in a discriminatory way, since very few of us are as unhinged as Chris Chan is, it is something that's very important to consider. It's why I find the stories of people who were diagnosed later to be so interesting. These are people who often had an easier time fitting in than people like me, but are also people who had to wear a mask and experience burnout more than me. As a teenager, while I never actively shared this belief, I often felt like I was overshadowed by these people, since they tend to be the loudest voices in activist groups. I've also noticed that they generally make autism a bigger part of their outward identity than someone like I would, and I used to find that very frustrating. As I grew to hear more of their stories, however, often through people I know in my own personal life, it all started to make more sense. These are people who lived their whole lives feeling different without anyone putting any attention toward it, so receiving that diagnosis must be an extremely relieving and satisfying moment. It's no wonder they'd become so passionate about the subject then. It's because of this that I don't often feel the need to discuss my autism unless it's something like this video, since I've always lived my life knowing that I've had it. And if I'm really that bothered by how few people in my position tend to speak up about their experiences, then I can just keep making these videos. So with that established, I wanted to shake things up a little bit. While last year, I discussed more of the contentious subjects on my own, I figured such subjects would be better discussed through the opinions of multiple people, which is why I decided to interview my friends Bultbeam, Eternum, Spice, and AirKingNeo. The interview format will exist to let them explain their own thoughts without me interrupting or taking a firm stance of agreement or disagreement with them. Additionally, I'll also be giving my opinions on these subjects after the interviewees have had their opportunities to speak. For transparency's sake, both my and AirKingNeo's responses were written down, while Bultbeam, Eternum, and Spice went off the cuff. As a result, some parts of the interview will be cut for the sake of saving time, and the full interviews will be available on my unscripted channel. Each person was given the questions in advance and had the options to opt out of a question they'd feel uncomfortable answering. So if not everyone answers every question, then that is why. One final thing I'd want to note is that as questions can occasionally dive into political territory, I must make it known that I am personally apolitical and am open to anyone's opinion so long as it's given constructively. With that said, how about we start? Introduce yourself. What is your cultural background, age, when you were diagnosed, your special interests, just the general stuff.
Okay, hello, I am Bultbeam Studios. So cultural background, I am Hispanic and white, maybe a bit Italian, but Italy isn't real, honestly. I don't think Italy is real. Yeah, age is 15, I know, Aiden talking of a minor, that's kind of crazy. I was diagnosed at age of 2, and I don't have too many special interests. However, I play Pokemon way too goddamn much. I think I need some help with that. If I'm out here traveling for that kind of shit, and yeah, it's clearly very autistic, yeah.
Okay, so I'm Spice, I'm 19 years old, I should be turning 20 sometime later this year, but not quite when the video comes out. I just want to let you know about that. So, I've been diagnosed with ADHD and Asperger's around one of my toddler years, so around like 2-ish, 3-ish. In terms of special interest-wise, I am a competitive Mons player. I came from, let's say, Aiden's channel from around like 2023-ish, and then I've developed my way through to Mons through there. I'm also generally a sports person. I've played a bunch of football in my lifetime. I've played cricket. I currently play cricket right now. And I do a little bit of lifting. Other than that, I'm not... Minecraft, I guess, is a big thing. Those are like the 3 main things I'd say about myself. Sports, Minecraft, Pokemon.
Yeah.
It's one of those kind of things.
Well, I'm French-Canadian, I'm 23 years old. I was diagnosed back in 2nd grade. It was really kind of changed how I saw myself, really, because I used to I knew people think that I was special, but now I figured it out for myself, so it was weird, and losing some old friends because to go to specialized classes. But my special interests are like, I'm an autistic gamer, what else, and I'm currently studying in cinema.
Not giving my real name, but my username is AirKingNeo. I'm a cis white guy from the Midwest United States in my mid-20s. I haven't been diagnosed because it costs too much money, and the United States kind of has like a healthcare system that's kind of almost worse than a third world country, so that's just probably not happening for a while. But like it's been pretty obvious my whole life. In terms of special interests, I would say that I'm really into game design. I don't view it as like an idea coming up with process, but more of a problem-solving process.
My name is Aiden. I'm 19 years old and was diagnosed at the age of 2. I'm Canadian, and my special interest was pretending to be American for 18 years. What are your opinions on people who self-diagnose?
They should probably keep it to himself. Like, personally, like, most of the time I don't believe it's true when they do. I would, like, suggest, like, having them actually do it themselves. But if they keep their opinion to themselves, they'll be fine. Because I know, like, a lot of people who, like, openly say, like, oh, I'm autistic, when they haven't tested. And to be honest, it kind of gets on my nerves. He's like, as an actually autistic person, this is one of the worst things to ever happen to me. And just, like, this, like, come on. at least go try to get an actual diagnosis, you lazy ass motherfucker.
I feel the term self-diagnosis can be a little bit disrespectful sometimes, because it can be seen as like a scapegoat for people who don't really think they have like the effort or the motivation to really strive to improve themselves. That being said, it's always worth checking in on identifying said problems. Let's say if you do have ADD, ADHD, or whatever the hell, you want to get that checked out as much as you can. Whilst it might be difficult in countries like the US, who don't really have the public healthcare to support these sort of needs, in where I'm from, the UK, the NHS has services to support the diagnosis and making sure that the problems are heard, and that's the big thing. No case should be left overlooked.
There are two types of people who self-diagnose. Those who truly believe it and those who do it for attention. Unfortunately, the latter is much more common, I feel.
Yeah.
And yeah, the latter will really like take attention away from the actual problem because they believe autism, ADHD, bipolarity, or whatever is quirky, and it just isn't. It's not as great as they feel. Like if they act all like quirked up and shit about being autistic, ADHD, chances are they're probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Us folks tend to keep it under wraps.
As someone who does myself, I can empathize with them. It takes a lot of time and money, and that's not something people always have. In some places, being officially designated can come with some difficulties. In the US political climate, apparently Elon Musk wants to put them in like camps or something, and that's like really scary. At least a friend warned me about that. So it's like, it can be a little scary at sometimes. So I totally understand the necessity to not be like have an official government or medical designation that sort of makes you seem like an other person to the rest of the world.
I used to have the more extreme opinion that all self-diagnosis is bad due to the ways it distracts from the voices of those who are actually proven to be autistic. It doesn't help that sites like TikTok actively worship the idea of feigning disability for attention. That said, I've grown to be more sympathetic to at least some of this crowd due to how time-consuming getting a diagnosis is. Apparently it's expensive in America too, but I don't really know or care since I'm Canadian. It's as a result of this that I'm fine with someone self-diagnosing while they look for an official diagnosis, as long as they keep quiet about advocating for it. Although, I'd be remiss to mention a more specific case like with my friend AirKingNeo. I didn't even know he was self-diagnosed before the interview because his autism just felt very obvious. So cases like those do exist, and I think it's fine for people in that position to advocate. So I know you kind of described this a little bit in the last one, but would you consider your life better or worse without autism?
That is a really tough question. It'd be really different. I'd be like a way different person. I'd probably be doing different things. Like, I'm not sure if I'd still be doing Pokemon stuff to this day. I'm not sure like what friends I'd have. Like, I know I lost a lot of friends, and part of it was me being an autistic idiot. But at the same time, I know I made a lot of friends too through my autism, and or at least partially. And I know that my life would be way different. Not sure if it'll be better or worse. I don't like my life right now, but I know it could get better. So I think it's better with autism, though it's probably just for right now. I gotta wait till I'm an adult to see like how it really is.
So, given with ADHD, it does allow me to like hyperfixate in a lot of places. So again, as a Mons player, I've been able to work harder upon that sort of direction. In terms of sports and coaching, I've been able to work harder because I'm more passionate about stuff, and I will work to the very my socks off to make sure I'm able to get to those set goals. However, I've also found it worse. It's mainly been worse as I feel like there's a label attached to me in a lot of ways, in a lot of places. I think people treat me differently from being on the spectrum itself. People often think, oh, I still need to be babysat, which is kind of dumb. It's dumb. Because, let's say, I'm oblivious. That's my big thing. I'm oblivious as hell in terms of like directions and stuff. I could have followed directions, but I need to make sure I understand said directions. And that's another big part about it. Just the sort of complications and sort of heaps and heaps and heaps of, to be quite honest, bullshit that people tend to throw on me, then it's rough, man. It's rough. But you gotta keep pushing on, making sure that you live the life as well as you can. And again, at the end of the day, I'm still not saying, I think there's a lot of time for me to develop out of that, out of this slump, out of this hole. And I think overall, with the sort of needs I have, I think eventually it will turn into a positive direction. I'm just currently in a bad slump right now. It's just one of those things.
It's quite a hard question to say because it would require me to imagine what my life would have been if I wasn't autistic. But at this point, would I even be myself anymore?
Oh yeah, completely agree with that.
Like I'd say it's better because I try to use my autism as a way to influence my fellow autists to try to help them.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't really talk about them because after 23 years of experience, I just know how to human if I were to say it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do love being able to understand my autistic brothers and sisters and help them.
I have no idea. It certainly led to a lot of difficulties and alienation in my life, and while that is a lot of negativity I could unpack, it's also part of who I am, how I think, and what I value. And I can't imagine who I would be if that was all different. I
wouldn't be who I am without autism, so I wouldn't have an answer either way. And do you think there should be a cure for autism?
Okay, autism isn't really like a problem that needs solving. However, I feel like if there's people who really want it, the option should be there. You know, like you could control if you could keep your autism or not. You should be able to. I mean, it's just like a transgender shit or being gay. Like you don't have to be the one thing if you don't want to. With that said, I don't like changing your race, but but yeah. Cure for autism, I'm perfectly fine with that. I wouldn't take it. However, if I understand why other people would, it's a pretty annoying thing for me at least. I know it could get on my nerves a lot.
I think there's ways you could say for and against. If for it allows the individual to function in the world properly and may not be subject to disadvantages. In, let's say, one of my family's cases, let's just call him Connor. Connor here is considered one of the most autistic people in the country. He's non-verbal, he will not eat properly basically, because he doesn't eat food. Connor, I think, should have the ability to be cured of autism, given the fact that because his case is so extreme, I think it would be beneficial for him to have the cure so he could function at least a more moderate life. However, in most cases, autism can be viewed as a superpower in a lot of ways. Having this like sense of autism allows them to function better. In a lot of cases, I think what you'll see throughout these interviews is some people will view autism as better because they're able to focus better on other tasks like hyperfixation and stuff like that. The neurodivergency allows them to gain like a certain personality, which I don't think if they were like considered quote unquote neurotypical, they would be, how do I say it, a lot more boring in their own rights. It makes them different, it makes them unique. That's the big thing that a lot of people strive with autism.
Cure would imply that it's a plague.
Mm-hmm.
The only plague here is people who advocate for such cures.
No, not at all. Organizations that claim to, like Autism Speaks, that want to quote-unquote cure autism, are actually just eugenics organizations. They're ran by people who aren't autistic, and it's ran by people who are afraid of autistic people. Not like afraid in the sense that like, oh, they're bad people. Maybe they are in some ways, but more of a, wow, I wish if I had a child, I wouldn't want them to be autistic, because apparently that's like bad for the parent or something. But like the whole point of that organization and that concept of curing autism is really to just make it so autistic people don't exist at all. It's not actually trying to help them, it's trying to make them not exist. Kind of like gay people not existing, like conversion therapy. It's sort of that concept.
For people who are able to live independently, I think that the idea of a cure is insulting, since curing my autism would be fundamentally changing who I am. For those who struggle more than me, however, I think the option should be available, albeit only when they're at a consenting age. And then the next one is another question that's a little similar, but do you consider autism to be a disability?
No. It's just a difference. It's something that makes us different. Like, yes, some people are really affected by it, and they need more support. However, I don't consider it a disability. No, autism in and of itself is not a disability to me.
It depends on how you interpret autism, to be honest. Some people, it can be viewed as a disability because you're struggling in a lot of places when others who are neurotypical would be a lot more confident in where they function. For instance, for me, it's staying awake in class. A lot of people are able to just do that on the rip. Me, I cannot. I physically cannot. But I think it can be viewed as a disadvantage because some people might not be able to go through the sort of experiences that a normal person can, a neurotypical person can. However, it could also be viewed as a superpower to someone because of things like hyperfixation, where you'll be able to focus harder on stuff that you really and truly specialize about.
It depends because autism, most autistic people cannot function in society because they have a light level of autism, but like a higher, I've seen like some high level of autism who, despite all my help and like they were adorable. Like they could do stuff. They're clearly they had it harder than most.
So I'm not a medical official, but in a personal sense, I want to say no. To me, autism means someone has a different way of thinking and processing, as opposed to how it's typically seen as a disability in communication. I can communicate very well with other people who are autistic or neurodivergent, and much better than I can people who are neurotypical, which is why I believe it's simply a different way or mode of thinking.
I explained this earlier in the video, and my answer was yes. You already know my reasoning, though. Do you think it's okay for autistic people, or even people in general, to say retard?
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I could not give two shits. I could not give two shits about someone saying the word retard, man. I think with retard, quote unquote, it's a word which, again, it's a label. I don't necessarily like labels because saying someone is just retarded is a bit stupid. I mean, because it denounces them to being just this, oh, I can't do anything properly. Like, that's just dumb, man. Every person, regardless of the regardless of where they are on the spectrum, has something to offer, and that's the big thing that I think people don't really understand properly. That being said, retard is just a word where it's just a word. That's all it is. It's just a word. If you use it in the wrong context, then again, that's where it gets into this argument where it's like, ooh, you shouldn't be saying that.
Oh,
but
of course.
To be quite frank, it's a word. That's all it is to me.
I'd say if you're in a friend group that tolerates it, it's fine. But you should watch your tongue in case with people you might not know. You don't want to start any drama and thing. And I don't think autistic people should have any higher privilege to say it. Because we are not retarded. That's the thing. The autistic people are not retarded to me, so they don't even apply. Like calling your fellow autist like you goddamn autist. Yeah, that can be funny at times. But because the difference between one who like uneducated on the matter and like let's say a standard guy who just calls people autistic when he means to say stupid or dumb, is because they like the education or the experience with autistic people. So like you just go to the next buzzword to insult someone because stupid isn't spicy anymore.
Pretty blatant with it. I don't think autistic people should say the R word. There's a lot of historical and social baggage tied to the word, and it's used as a derogatory term for disabled people. When autistic people say the R slur, they're using it to refer to the mentally disabled, just trying to exclude themselves from the category of those who are mentally disabled. It's using the language in a way that's still derogatory towards mentally disabled people, just, with the sense that like, oh, those are mentally disabled people, but me, an autistic person, no, I would never be. That's still not good. That's still, derogatory and offensive towards that group of people. We have better insults out there. Just say stupid, it's really simple.
If you've watched one of my uncut videos, then you should be very familiar with how liberal my use of the word retard is, so that should make it clear where I stand. Like with any taboo word, you should be careful with your usage of it, and if you're in a room with someone who'd be discomforted or hurt by the word, you obviously shouldn't say it. Otherwise, I think it's fair game for anyone to say it. After all, it'd be pretty retarded to prevent someone from speaking their mind. Do you think autistic people should be accommodated by a wider society?
Yeah, probably, because living as an autistic person is kind of ass because nobody accommodates for you, and you're put up to the same standards as quote-unquote normal people, so some autistic people are just less capable of doing things, like certain things, and so yes, life should be like accommodated for autism in some form in our society. At least that's what I believe. I feel like that'd make living a lot, not easier, but more reasonable in our society.
In terms of accommodation, because I kind of just went off topic there for a second, I think more knowledge should be spread towards autism between adults especially, but even like children, again, just understanding the brain. I think that's something that needs to be understood more in society. I believe in places where autism is significantly, how do I say it, overlooked or undervalued, I believe there should be equity to help accommodate such disadvantages, basically. Making sure that they are able to live on the accounts of okay, so I can function in society and be able to and have that additional support where I'm not able to succeed.
Yes, they should. One mistake that the most people tend to make is think autistic people are like handicapped or like have like some or just function just less well than other people. But the truth is, autistic people is just being autistic is being a specialist in something. Like you're not a jack of all trades. You actually like you can have like greater talent than any other man on this planet. But like of course you can suck at something else that like every other people are better than you. It's like autistic people have a talent trade-off.
Yeah.
And they should be accommodated because a specialist will always be better than a jack of all trades.
I mean, absolutely. A lot of society and social expectations are built on neurotypical norms, which often leads to a lot of difficulty for autistic people. If the world was designed better for all kinds of people, then everything would honestly just be better for everyone.
While I do really want to be accommodated more, I don't think it's a realistic wish to have. I really dislike the idea of making other people act a certain way to support my needs, since I value authenticity a lot more than most. By the time you become an adult, I think if you're complaining about your job or friend group not accommodating your needs, then you just need to find another job or friend group. Granted, kids and teenagers don't exactly have that freedom, but that's exactly why special education rightfully exists to give autistic students a breather. Do you think things have gotten easier for autistic people over the years?
Oh, definitely. Like a lot of people are getting diagnosed now. A lot of people are able to get like IEPs and stuff for that. It's real nice, or it's better than it was before. Like, I mean, I know I'm not an unk, but I know before it was really bad. So now it's like better, and a lot of people are way more accepting of autism too. So that's really nice. Living an autistic person, it isn't easy. However, it feels easier than it probably could have been.
I think in those sort of perspectives, having the increased expectations from things like social media can harm a person with autism or people on the spectrum who are neurodivergent. However, it has gotten easier in some places because there's a greater awareness towards autism. While it's not perfect, it has definitely improved than just the write-off of, oh, you're just dumb. We've come a long way from those kind of days in the 1960s, 1970s. So at the moment, I would say no, but I think it's gotten harder, but I think it will become easier over time. I'm optimistic about that.
Well, I'd say it did, because of two reasons. even with the advent of self-diagnosis and the quirky stuff and all, it had a side. I believe it had a side effect of sensibility people to the cause. So, and also because people know that Autism Speaks is full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
So like people that tend to like. They're widely known as the Peter for autists, and fucking go for eugenics, and probably will try to shoot me dead if they could. So which I do believe that Autism Speaks should really shut the fuck up for once.
Yeah.
But yeah, we been people and the wolf vaccine stuff is and this has been kind of like debunked long ago, and all this drama surrounding autism, the mystery of autism has been like unraveled, and people tend to understand the autism diagnosis better, which makes us since the diagnosis is more understood, autism is more understood, and autistic people are in fact more understood.
I would say absolutely yes, and that might seem a little weird because, like, I did say that the current government administration for the United States is kind of not so great, but like in a long-term scheme of things, yes. And the reason for that is the internet. The internet lets people connect with each other and, of course, other minorities or other niche interests to help them find community with each other. As the internet slowly spreads those ideas out, as people continue to interact, with all different sections of culture and backgrounds, more acceptance is gained. So, like, my parents don't really know anyone who lives in another country. Me, who uses the internet, I know people in England, Australia, France, other parts of Europe. So when it comes to autistic people, because it's easier to connect with people online, people are more likely today to know an autistic person, and same with transgender and other things, than they did in the past, which is why there's a bunch of old people today saying, well, when I was young, these people didn't exist. No, they existed. They just had to be in the closet or be repressed, or, you didn't even talk to them at all when they were young.
Mm-hmm.
So thankfully, there's more interaction, and that's letting people understand and empathize better with autistic people and other minorities.
Despite posing this question, I actually don't really know what my answer would be. I feel just as ignored for my autism as I did as a kid, however, so I suppose my answer would be a no. So then, my final question then is, has it become easier to live autistic as an adult?
To be quite honest, my adulthood has been very dogshit. very, very dogshit. Mainly because of the family-related issues I've had. It's difficult for me to keep level-headed at the time, be kept level-headed at times, and I think that has really been difficult for me especially in my adulthood. Even if I'm able to control it at times, I can't get everything right. That's just all it is. Sometimes I'm gonna mess up, and that's just life, really. People aren't perfect. I live in a rural place. I need a car. To be fair, that costs money. I need to be in a more stable place in terms of residency. I need to be able to connect to people more, and that's the big issue I have right now. Some people view this differently, but for me, I think it's become difficult because of circumstances like this, where I think I need to be in a better environment, and that's just what it is. But I believe it will be easier in the future, given that I'll be able to afford income, I'll be able to get a job or two, given that I'll have experience in a lot of departments. Has it become easier to live autistic life as an adult whilst being autistic? I don't think so. However, I'm optimistic in the future that it will become easier, and I will be able to function in society like a normal person.
I do believe I'd say yes. Because like mostly when you get like bad judgment from your autism, it's like misinformed children like that tend to grow out of it and just tend to not care anymore. And also, as an adult, you can generally fit better into society because you've mastered the art of masking, or just like being yourself is like not. It's just all right. Like for example, I have lots of people like me and they don't even know I'm autistic.
Yeah.
And some of them I told them and nothing's changed. Mm-hmm. It's more like a fun fact and not like some life changing fact.
Yeah.
And this is why I see myself as some sort of paradox sometimes. That I tend to want to be a champion of my people, and yet I hardly act like them.
The answer to that I have is I don't know. I mean, I'm in my mid-20s, but to me an adult is someone who lives on their own, works a full-time job, or at least is wanting to, and pays their own bills. I'm over 18, but I don't do any of that, so I can't really say for certain.
The answer is yes, but I'll wait until the end of the video to explain why. Oh geez, what a wonderful segue that's turned out to be. The year was 2005. YouTube was created, KyoAni was still young with the release of Air, the Royal Rumble had one of the most batshit insane finishes I've ever seen, and I was born. As a kid, I wasn't exactly normal. I was non-verbal until the age of 4, I was a picky eater, and I was generally quite quiet. Neither of my parents really knew anything about autism, but my signs were so abundantly obvious that I got my diagnosis only after living 2 years of life. It was a shocking revelation to those in my family, but my parents were dedicated to giving me all of the attention that they could. My mom did a ton of research herself, and I was put into special education as soon as I was able to. Around this time, my eccentricities only grew more clear. My first special interest was with Pixar's Cars, a movie I found to be surprisingly quite good in my adulthood, but was one I was absolutely obsessed with as a kid. I'd rewatched the film so much that my parents could probably quote every line, and I'd play with the toys at every opportunity I'd get. When driving the toys, I'd put them all in this neat little line, then move one of them, stim out of excitement, and then move another one only to stim again at this wonderful sight once more. It was with this early obsession that no one in my life could really question my diagnosis. Like, a story like that is probably as stereotypical as it gets for an autistic kid. Of course, my early life had other elements to it as well. I'd eventually grow more interests, and by that, I mean video games. I was really into Sonic as a kid, but I was also a big Mario fan too. A couple of years later, I discovered more games I'd get into, such as Pokemon, Kirby, and My Singing Monsters. The fun thing about all of this is that even after all of these years later, I've never really outgrown any of these interests. Sure, Sonic hasn't had a good game in over a decade, yes, Frontiers was mid and I want a refund, but even then, I at least still have a casual enough interest in him. As a kid, I wore my eccentricities on my sleeve. No one really bullied me for being different because everyone in school enjoyed the things that I enjoyed. Things were simple back then, where I could just ask someone to be my friend and they'd oblige. Not everyone liked me, of course, but I didn't really care. Above all, the thing people liked about me most was my ability to embrace myself for who I was, no matter the circumstance. That died as I grew older, in what very easily have to be the worst years of my life. By the time that I had turned 11, the kids around me had grown older, caring more about fitting in, and when I'd struggled to understand the social cues and order of my classmates, I was quickly trampled and forgotten. I started my new school year without any friends. Around this point in my life, my parents' marriage had started to show cracks, and it resulted in a lot of moving and changing schools. At first, this wasn't a big deal because I was comfortable with myself, but cracks began to show the year prior. I was 10 years old when I started to make YouTube videos, mostly about Minecraft, but I also covered other games like Smash. Obviously, the idea of a kid with a chipmunk voice yapping about Minecraft is pretty much synonymous with cringe on the internet. I've since grown to actually like these early videos for how nostalgically childlike they are, but not everyone did. It was receiving the occasional backlash on these, from a friend of all people, that I got my first real glimpse into the idea that maybe I didn't fit in. And that's where we get back into my new school, where the one friend I had ended up going to a different school than me, and I was left alone. I found that the environment here overstimulated me a lot more easily. I was also much more sensitive at this age, crying a lot easier. For the first week of school, I'd go into my mom's car with tears in my eyes. Every single day, as I was alone and scared, every time I'd go into that building. It wasn't really that I was bullied, but more that I was just ignored, unable to have a foothold anywhere. The year afterward, I'd find myself in my old school district, as my parents somehow thought it would be a good idea to revive their already sunken ship of a marriage. This was the worst year of my life. On the bright side, I'd find myself reuniting with another friend. This friend was actually Andrew, who showed up in my last video. He, along with Josh, are some of the most important people in my life nowadays, but my experience in school was so dreadful that I never really appreciated the friendship as much as I should have. This was because I got my first taste of bullying, and boy did it reek. Thinking about it even now is genuinely quite traumatizing for me. It's embarrassing to say that, even 7 years later, I'm still fighting off the effects of the nasty words that were labeled toward me. Most of it happened in my math class, a class I found so boring that I tried to replace it with any other activity. My favorite of these was reading the Pokemon Adventures manga, which the teacher would take from me and display at the front of the class to have them all laugh at how much of a loser I was for reading a kid's manga. I remember crying in the middle of class multiple times, having to hide my tears as if I was taking a nap out of boredom. The memory that sticks to my mind most is when I sat in a trash can and told everyone that this, right here, is what they all thought of me and saw me as. Even thinking about it makes my stomach churn. It's genuinely hard to recount this shit, but I'm saying it all because this is the moment that changed me. This was the first time I wanted to kill myself. It was seeing my mom cry when I told her about it that I decided to keep on enduring my daily torture at school. The year after, I'd miraculously make a new friend in Josh, who also showed up in my last video. But other than that, the year was uneventful. This was the first year that I finally stopped being myself. I treated my gaming and anime hobbies as something shameful, trying not to stand out under any circumstance and wallowing in my sorrow silently each day. By the time I became a proper teenager, my life sat in a straight line. I'd enjoy the times I get to joke around with my friends, I'd find all of my classes boring as shit, and I continued to be as forgettable as possible. In this period, my personality became my YouTube channel, a project I put my whole life and being into. I became terrified of the idea of adulthood, having to replace school with a job. At the time, a job sounded exactly like school, so while I created videos partly out of passion, I also made them out of fear for growing up. For the most part, having something to put this much time into was a genuinely good form of escapism, but it also had some faults, as I ignored other aspects of my life and was driving myself into an inevitable crash of burnout that would come in my adulthood. My social skills were practically destroyed after the pandemic, as I didn't make any attempt to branch out of my usual life. Additionally, life at home wasn't great either. I don't exactly want to get into it much since it's been an ongoing thing for almost 4 years now, but while my family is still full of amazing people who I love very much and would take a bullet for without even a second thought, it's also full of a depression so deep that it's painful to stay in that environment for a long enough time. So, it was with that, along with ignoring most forms of socialization to make weekly videos, that I finally broke. All of my depression and anxiety finally showered through when I was in a park with my friends. I walked towards some bushes away from where my friends would be, and yet they noticed me in a state I did not want them to see me in. I was scared to show my friends what my tears looked like. I didn't know what they'd think of me, the guy who normally tried to lighten their moods with a bombardment of stupid jokes. To my surprise, though, they almost acted like they were waiting for this to happen. I'd already made jokes about my parents finally getting divorced the year prior, or the state of the house that I lived in, but this was the first time where I was honest about just how much pain I was in. It was through being honest about my struggles that my friends opened up about their struggles as well. I somehow was never able to see it due to how much I put both of their strengths on a pedestal, but like me, they're also outcasts who share many of my same anxieties. To this day, I still consider that day to be one of the most important of my life, and it's what shaped my adulthood into what it would look like. I've been an adult for almost 2 years now, and it's been a weird experience. On one hand, it's not like my life has really gotten any easier. I've had to go through some really tough shit. I talked about my car crash on this channel before, which was a traumatic experience that completely screwed me up. On the bright side, though, it at least made me get a job. As of now, I've worked 2 jobs over the course of my life. I don't have a ton of autism-related stories with my first job, since I surprisingly got along quite well with my coworkers. Sure, I was basically always super anxious with those outside of my department, but I didn't really mind that since I liked dicking around with the people I was comfortable with. Granted, another thing I've talked about weirdly often on the channel is my disdain for my boss, which eventually led me to quit and start working where I am now. My current job is one of the last places I'd tell any autistic person to work. I went from grocery to fast food, and the change in environment is stark. It's a super fast-paced job, it's super loud, the coworkers are all people who I can't for the life of me understand, and the free food is really good, so it at least has that. While my goal throughout school was essentially just to live long enough before I jumped, my goal as an adult has been to actually focus on getting my life together. I was never in good shape, but I work out consistently now, and generally try to eat healthily, even if I'm not on a diet or anything. I've also been job hunting because I frankly feel inadequate where I currently work. This was less of an issue last year, where I was able to make friends despite my lack of social skills, but here I've been dealing with a lot more self-confidence and insecurity issues. I'm not good at my job, I don't fit in with my coworkers, and I generally get the feeling that no one really wants to see me there deep down. It's a soul-crushing feeling to feel like you're not needed, and it's the same feeling I get when I job hunt. That insecurity is driving me to improve myself, but it's also very bad for my mental health, and I know I don't need to feel bad about myself to strive for more. These are all things to keep in mind as well, given how I'll be leaving my parents' nest to live with my friends in the coming months. When the added responsibility of paying bills starts to weigh on me, it's good to make sure that I have the right mindset needed to prevent myself from feeling trapped the same way I did as a teenager. Because ultimately, while responsibility may be a pain in the ass, freedom with responsibility is always better than no freedom without responsibility. For anyone who has hated school like me, just remember that one day you will be free. Your life is valuable no matter what anyone thinks, and you can go to great places with the right mindset. So, that's the video. I feel like this is the end of an era somehow. This will mark a year since I've uploaded to my Pokemon channel, and I want to put some closure to that. Of course, I've made it known that I've burned out, and it means that my love for making Pokemon videos is mostly dead at this point. I am still playing the game though, so I do have one dream project that I want to make in the coming future. But such a project would be a very lofty goal for me to actually make. Who knows though, it might be a better end of the channel that I once called home for a whole 8 years of my life. Another thing I've noticed is that it's been almost a year since I've returned to this channel. It's been an interesting year, full of high highs that I would have never imagined. Even the lows didn't feel as bad, since the goal now is to just make a really good video, instead of maximizing the algorithm. I hated trading who I was just to make you guys click on what I'd had to say. And while I obviously want my videos to get views, and I do experiment with titles and thumbnails a lot as a result, I can now more easily accept when a video gets ignored. Last year was the year where I forgot why I even started making videos. It was hard to get views in the double digits back when I made Minecraft Let's Play videos, and yet I made them anyway, because I loved expressing myself. Ultimately, being able to rediscover making videos out of love and passion has truly been one of the best parts of this year for me. So, this took a lot longer to make than I expected it to. Just like with the Japanese video I made, I ended up sick for a whole week, unable to record any audio as a result. Otherwise, I'm just very concerned with how long I made this one. I'm glad I was able to make such a massive project, however, so I don't really intend to make any other autism videos of this scale again. Next year, I'll probably go for something more specific about autism, like autism representation in anime, or how it feels to have autism in the workplace. I'm not quite sure yet, since that video won't be out until next year, but it is something to have in the back of my mind. Anyway, I'm gonna stop writing down my random thoughts and just do the Patreon roll call. As such, I want to give an enormous thanks to my Phantom tier patron Squizzy and my Confidant tier patrons Regimania and Eternum. If you want to add your name to the list, as well as get plenty of other benefits such as a private Discord server, over 300 scrapped video ideas, 500 unlisted videos, early access to my videos, previews of upcoming videos, and my entire Google Drive, you can find it on Patreon. I also have a final tier that no one's bought yet, so perhaps you could be the first name there. While donations are the best way to keep the channel going, views, likes, and comments help a ton as well. No matter which of these people you happen to be, I thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you all next time.